Good afternoon, game changers. We're at week 3, level 3, the culture versus God. I'm going to say that again because that's so powerful and so important. The culture versus God. The culture, more often than not, is not on the same page with God. If I go out on a limb and I dare say, there are times when the culture believes that it is God and it wants to teach our young people, our youth, that they are their own gods and they are able to make their own decisions about so many things that God has already spoken about and to. But they're caught. There's a conflict between what they're being bombarded with on the outside by the culture and what they may feel or have been taught on the inside by you and other caring adults in their lives. But the conflict is real. And if I go back to what I said about the C of commitment, we must be committed to getting on the inside of things, to getting on the inside of them, things that the culture would not want them to have on the inside of them. And whether they are deceived or confused or confident, in order for them to play the game of life God's way, we the adults must maintain our level of commitment to their winning, and we must be credible as we go, because if those two don't occur, they won't collaborate with us. I don't go out into the parking lot or the schools and grab kids and drag them into my office. And I definitely can't make them stay or talk when they come. But out of my commitment to them winning, I am willing to be credible in meaningful ways for them. And oftentimes that's being non-judgmental. I don't agree with a lot of things that I hear from the youth that I work with. I don't want them to believe them. But from a place of being credible, I have chosen to be non-judgmental as I teach. I don't compromise what I teach, but I choose to be gracious and loving and non-judgmental even as I teach the lessons, the wisdom that I believe God would have me to teach them. And sometimes it's hard because my emotions run high. I cannot tell you some of the things that I've been faced with in my work with youth. And it would be easy for me to get angry and become an authoritarian and just dismiss what they think or say or feel. But that would only push them away and they wouldn't collaborate with me. But what I have learned and what I am reminded of time and time again is that choice matters. So when it comes to the culture versus God, we have to recognize the influence of the culture is so much more loud and pervasive and persistent and consistent. They are bombarded by the messages from the culture. And if our messages aren't effective as we teach them, then they are doomed. They are on a self-destructive course. So this level, culture versus God, is more dense. This level takes them deeper into an understanding of what have you embraced from the culture as factual or truthful, and how does that measure up to what God would say or God's perspective about a given subject matter. And the way I started this session was I asked them if they had an audience alone with God and no one was around, what would they ask God? Because at the end of the day, I believe that the only answer that matters are the answers that come from God. And I say to the group, and I'm very specific, the source of my truth is the Bible, which I believe is God's word. I don't compromise that. That's what I believe in. That's what I stand on. But I recognize every youth that I encounter, every youth that I work with, every youth that I have the opportunity to love and touch may not feel that the Bible is God's word or that God is the authority. And that's why level 2 asks the young people, who's your boss? How did you determine that that individual or that God would or will be your boss? So now we're into the questions that aren't always discussed. Now we're talking about the questions that are sensitive or difficult or embarrassing. And we often as adults try to give them our answer. And if they don't accept our answer, then we are angry or we reject them and the collaboration is over. And you've seen it. When a young person shuts down on you and tunes you out, they're done. And they may be polite, but they may become more disruptive. But when they're done collaborating with you, they're done. So I start this level with the question, if you could have an audience alone with God, what would you ask God? And then I move into, once I get over the shock of the questions that they would ask, then I move into, do you believe that God will answer? And I want to explore whether they believe God will talk to them or not, or whether God has spoken with them. And I ask them, have you ever heard God speak to you in a way that you were confident that it was God? And again, I'm quick to share. I can't prove that what I heard from God was from God. I can compare it to what he sounds like in the Bible. I can compare it to what I've read for myself. But I couldn't stand up in front of a group of people and say, absolutely, unequivocally, I know that was God. But I asked them, if you're in a crowd and you were to hear one of your parents call your name, is there a good chance that you would recognize that voice as your parents? And that comes straight out of my children's book. And most of them said, of course I would. I know my mom or dad's voice. Well, I then quickly slide in the fact that when you've listened to God enough, you know his voice as well. And you can distinguish his voice from the voice of any other source of noise. I call it noise. But I quickly remind them, God doesn't have to shout. He's God. If we want to hear him, we must put ourselves in a position that we can hear him. And then we begin to delve into some of the questions that God would be asked by people and how he might answer. And I want them to recognize that sometimes God's answers will surprise you. He won't say it the way you thought he would. And I share a story about when I had to make a decision to leave my family to attend a funeral with my father. And it meant that my husband would be a single dad with 3 small children for about 4 to 5 days. And my dad had asked me to accompany him to his brother's funeral. And I had a husband and 3 children at home, and I was torn. And I said to God, I can't make this decision. I need you to help me. And God said, honor your mother and father. Excuse me? Hello? Is that a yes or is that a no? But as I sat with it, I smiled at first because I realized God sounds like the Bible. But then as I quietly began to process what he had said, I understood that since my dad had asked me to attend the funeral with him, it would be honoring of him if I went. Whew. See, that's what I want the young people to realize. When you hear from God, there's a peace. Even in the last group that I had with the youth yesterday, one of the young boys said he could hear a peace in the answers that God gave to the people whose questions and answers are shared in the book. And I had a peace. And then when I approached my husband about the possibility of me going, he was completely supportive and encouraging. And I smiled because either God had handled that or God wouldn't tell me to do something that he didn't believe that my husband would support. But at the end of the day, when I heard from God, I obeyed. And that's the last part of level 3. Will you obey? Because if you listen, but you don't obey, you're exploding. But if you listen and you surrender, you win. So level 3 begins to shift to, now let's get to the place where we struggle. Let's get to the places where we're uncertain. Let's get to the places where we're conflicted and begin to go to the source. In the book, there's a wonderful section on being God's sheep and hearing and knowing his voice. And there's even an encouraging section on, if you haven't heard God speak, be patient, don't give up. But again, if I go back to lesson 1, you can't cover it all. Find where your group is and give them what they need, and then steer them to find the rest of it, and be open and available later to have more conversations with them about the parts of the book that you weren't able to cover in the study. Because you can't cover it all. I've got to say it again. But you want to follow the lead of your group, of your youth, so you make sure you give them what they need. And as you read the book yourself, you will have enough information to touch on all of the things in the book that matter, even if and when you can't go deep. But you don't want to be caught short-handed, or you don't want to be caught without an answer because you didn't properly prepare by reading the material first and studying the worksheets that accompany them, because the worksheets are guides for you to facilitate the work that they do. So level 3 is that more advanced level, and the material reflects that. But the lessons in this level are necessary for level 4. So have a great week. Enjoy your time with the youth. I look forward to hearing from you. Give me a shout out. Hit me up on my Facebook group or the website. Don't feel like you're in this alone. We will have dialogues and conversations. All you have to do is reach out and say, help, Dr. V. Have a great week.